Alright, Shield Hero Season 3 just ended. This will be the end of Book 12. And the show ends in a pretty big cliffhanger, pretty much where the book ends. So I don't know if they think a Season 4 is likely. I hope so, because Season 3 was definitely better than Season 2 overall, so I guess we'll see. But let's just get into the slight differences between the book and anime for one more time this season. So the episode starts off, and they're in this little island cove thing that Sedina takes them to. And this is all pretty accurate to the book, so I'm not going to go through excruciating detail for it. Although there is a nice little thing in here where Naofumi says that Raphtalia got her knights back to herself because the kids are getting over their trauma, so she's staying in his place again. And now it's her job to fight off Atla. And Naofumi explains that Galeon is the weakest of the Emperor Dragons, and about how the Demon Dragon took control of the core, and he's sharing a body with baby Galeon now, the one who raised Windia. And the reason that they end up in this cove where Sedina can take them is to get away from Atla and Foal. So Atla and Foal were bickering. Naofumi's like, we should probably go somewhere where I can actually concentrate, because Ren and Itsuki are still struggling with basic magic. So he's having a hard time teaching them and then learning stuff on his own as well. So Naofumi makes a joke like, Raphtalia, don't leave my side no matter what. You're the only one I can trust. And that's because Sedina is going to try to seduce him or hang all over him if it's just the two of them. Or if it's just Sedina and Galeon. And then Sedina says, I wonder who Naofumi is actually more afraid of. And Naofumi doesn't say it, but he thinks to himself, Raphtalia, obviously, because she got really scary whenever Sedina was all over him. And we get some details in here about how Galeon's lucky to not have been assimilated completely because him and the other Emperor Dragon were not the same type pretty much. And he explains that this way of the dragon vein that they're learning is its own different type of magic, and that normally you're using magic from yourself, but for this you're borrowing it from other sources. And Naofumi compares it to Therese and how she pulls her magic from jewels. And Sedina explains that the way of the dragon vein is really good for counter magic, which is something that Naofumi has issues with a lot, is people countering his magic and his buffs and stuff. Their training goes on for a couple hours, and Naofumi gets really pissed off, but eventually he picks it up pretty quickly. And Galeon and Sedina are both pretty impressed. And he describes it as trying to assemble a puzzle inside of his head before he can cast it and then choosing his target. And this is where Sedina proposes that they have a drink since it's getting late, and she pulls out a barrel, and Naofumi's like, where did you get that? And she says she found it on a sunken ship. And then she explains that Melromark has salvage law. So if you salvage something in Melromark, you get 70%, and then the other 30 goes to Melromark. But then she says that only applies to their territory and their territorial waters, so she gets to keep all of it since it was in international waters. Obviously, Sedina gets them deliberately drunk, even though Raphtalia has a pretty high tolerance because she drank Lark under the table. And now Fumi's sitting there with a map of the sea and then trying to figure out their plans. And Sedina keeps asking Raphtalia what she thinks of Naofumi, and she's like, I have a lot of respect for him. And he seems surprised by this because he thinks that she's always annoyed by him and his antics in general. And eventually Sedina asks if Raphtalia wants to marry him, and obviously she's stuttering and stuff. And Naofumi is thinking to himself, it wouldn't really bother me if she did say that she liked me, but I'm pretty sure she had other things that were much more important to her, like not letting more people be enslaved and that sort of thing. And then he does bring up the fact that chronologically she is actually young, and maybe she shouldn't have been drinking really. And Naofumi kind of reflects to himself about how he's never really enjoyed drinking and that he just feels kind of alone because he doesn't really get drunk, and everyone else around him is getting shit-faced, so he's just kind of on his own as like the sober person. And then this is where Sedina says that Dragon Killer and Tanuki are both famous drinks where they come from, and that's how she knocked out Galeon and Raphtalia. And this is when Sedina asks Naofumi what he really thinks of Raphtalia, and we get a little flashback here of him reflecting that a bunch of raccoon-type demi-humans showed up to the village and kind of wanted to not do much and leech off of him, but he also had a hard time turning them away because of how much he cared about Raphtalia. And at this point, it seems like this is the first time that he's seen Sedina get really angry, and she kind of goes off on him and says that she doesn't believe any blood ties that they might have with his most trusted assistant are irrelevant at all, and they might as well be strangers. And he says that they can stay if they actually want to help with the reconstruction, and that within a couple days, all of them had disappeared. And then he mentions Sedina acting strangely and glaring at stuff around the village, but there'd never be anybody actually standing there. And this is kind of already implied, but this is where you find out that Sedina's real motivation for buying the slaves in Zeltobel was to buy Raphtalia specifically. And then this is where she gives her whole background that's in the anime, so I'm going to skip this part of the book. And we get some inner thoughts here from Naofumi about how he wants Raphtalia to have a comfortable, peaceful life once they're done. And he just wanted her to be happy, even though sometimes he hated the whole world that he wanted her to at least have a peaceful place to stay. And here's an interesting little thing. You find out that Sedina says that Raftalia looks like a raccoon type, but she's not quite. And Sedina looks like an orca, but she's not quite. So they're all kind of similar species, but not the exact thing. And then Naofumi says he doesn't really care what her type is regardless. And Sedina asks him if he's not ready to commit to a real relationship, that she'd prefer that Naofumi just settles for her. And he's kind of confused, like, what? And she's saying that she wants him to be ready to settle down by the time that he actually wants to be with Raftalia. And that if he's not ready to commit, but he still wants sex, that she'd rather Naofumi use her for that than Raftalia. And then Naofumi is like, what do you think? I'm some kind of savage. And he gives this really big inner monologue to himself about how he'd rather die than be intimate with a woman. And he trusts Raftalia, and he does like her, and he could tell it to her face, but he'd rather not. And then he's like, but is it romantic? I don't really know. And then he refers to her as his trusty sidekick. And they'd been through a lot together. But he also did view her as kind of a daughter. And then he still thinks that regardless, Raftalia is going to remain focused on her mission and protecting people and not romance and those sorts of things. And then he puts it together that when Sedina says very end, she means like a lifelong commitment. But Naofumi says he doesn't know if he wants to commit to staying in this world because he'd rather go to his own world once this one's become peaceful. And then he realizes that this is why Sedina is always teasing him and stuff, is essentially to keep him away from Raftalia, because she didn't want him to essentially take advantage of Raftalia's feelings. And he talks about how serious she looked. And this is where Sedina explains how she knows Raftalia's parents and a little bit about Kyuten Lo, but she doesn't say the name. It's supposed to be like a parallel to Japan where they're super isolationist and that sort of thing. And you find out that Sedina was a priestess. And then she explains a little bit more detail that Raftalia's father didn't want her to know because he didn't want her getting caught up in all that stuff, and that they probably won't do anything as long as they don't upset them. And then she says explicitly something like you and Raftalia getting intimate. And I guess this is because he's a hero and she's in line for the throne, or at least has some blood relation to it. And then she says outright, if you decide that you really want to have a kid with Raftalia, don't do it until after you crush that country and those family issues. And then she says to promise her. And then this is when the old man shows up who's his armorer and explains that he's done with the Miko outfit and that Sign helped him out. And obviously this is getting close to where the show ended. And you get this whole little inner monologue of Naofumi gushing about how good Raftalia looks in the Miko outfit. And he says, well, that settles it. We're sticking with this outfit for you now, from now on, Raftalia. And the show did a pretty good job with this whole attack from Kyuten Lo, so I'm not really going to go through the specifics. There's not much that they didn't include. They do keep mentioning like killer whale Therianthropes and a whole bunch of other stuff in the book, but that's just kind of a mixed bag of demi-humans and Therianthropes and whatever. But overall, the anime did a pretty good job, so. And there's a little thing in here mentioned about Sakura stones, but you don't get an explanation for what those are until next book. And it's pretty much just like the show. The show really stuck to book 12 since they used 6 episodes for it, so that's been nice. But yeah, Naofumi and Raftalia use their cooperative magic, and just like you saw in the show, they're all seeing illusions for a while. And here's one of the book illustrations where you can see Raftalia unleashing her attack. And then Atla explains that this attack is combined magic and life force. And Atla explains this with some exposition. And this is where Raftalia finds out that she's the equivalent of the royal family in another country. And this is pretty similar to the end of the show too, where Naofumi kind of goes crazy and starts doing like an evil laugh, and everyone is kind of looking at him like he's lost his mind. And he goes on a big rant about how much nerve they have to invade his place and try to hurt Raftalia. And Sedina said, you told me I'd have to crush a country, right? Well, why not? I guess I'll go do it then. So then everybody's like asking if he's really serious, and obviously he is. And they do make it a little bit more jokey in the book, where Raftalia apologizes, and Naofumi says, don't worry about it. If that's what it takes to dress you in the Miko outfit, then overcoming is the only choice we have. Him deciding that they're going to attack is where the book ends. In the show, you get like a little preview of them crossing the ocean to go to find this country and make their way there. You do get like a little montage of characters. And if we do get a season 4, you'll get to see more of Siltvelt, you'll get to see Kyuten Lo, and we should get to see some growth for Foal and the Phoenix, which is a pretty big part of the story that I think everybody will really like. I don't want to say too much about it in case it does get greenlit soon. And with the way the show ended, it's not clear to me either way. If they think they're going to get another season, or they already know it, or what the deal is. I actually just saw recently that Shield Hero was like top 15 in light novel sales, which makes me think that they will do a season 4. But Book 22 came out like 3 years ago, or over 3 years ago at this point, and I haven't heard anything about book 23. So if the author has stopped the series, I don't know how much that'll impact the anime continuing to get made. But apparently, I think it's a she, finished the web novel, so I'm kind of surprised that the light novels have just stalled the way that they have. But yeah, that's it for me for this one. Season 3 was definitely an improvement from Season 2, but from what I've seen online, a lot of people just don't like the Spirit Tourist arc anyway, which is too bad, because I actually really enjoyed it in the books. But yeah, I guess we'll see. Hopefully we'll get a Season 4 and we can continue on. Alright, thanks. See ya.